15 years ago, I had the opportunity to meet our next presenter when she was appointed and served for 8 years as the first woman bishop to the Mississippi Conference. And can I just tell you what a wonderful day that was in the life of this fourth generation United Methodist laywoman. Bishop Hope Morgan Ward's leadership navigated the Mississippi United Methodist Conference and its communities through years of recovery following the devastation of Hurricane Katrina in 2005, just 1 year after she received her appointment. I watched her live out moral courage by standing firm in her values, staying emotionally connected to her people, all the while in the midst of opposition and rejection around some key social justice issues. The privilege of introducing her today invited me to recall many stories that I have been reminded of. And there are many, but the one that I've chosen to share with you today is remembering the faces of two male clergy, both members at different times of her extended cabinet. Each said to me on separate occasions, "I have learned more about effective leadership under Bishop Hope Morgan Ward than any other person I've ever served along with." Bishop Ward currently serves as Bishop in Residence for the North Carolina Annual Conference. She's the former board president of Global Ministries, and she currently serves on the board for the General Board of Church and Society. Thank you, Bishop Ward, for your unwavering leadership and your support and participation in our I Am Her Women's Leadership Summit by calling us to action to build upon the 19th Amendment.
Grace, peace, and power to you, my sisters. Thank you for being a part of this virtual conversation about suffrage and the full rights of women to participate as citizens in our nations around the world. In the United States, a statue was unveiled in Central Park in New York City on Women's Equality Day in late August. The statue is remarkable. It's the first statue of women who have actually lived in the 167-year history of Central Park. It's a statue that depicts action. 3 women are at table, dreaming, visioning, working, strategizing together. You see them here: Sojourner Truth, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Susan B. Anthony. Sojourner Truth was an abolitionist, working boldly, courageously, fearlessly for the abolition of slavery in the United States. And she was a feminist working for suffrage for all citizens, for women in the United States. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was a great thinker and writer, and Susan B. Anthony was an amazing, amazing public speaker. Together, Stanton and Anthony worked, with Stanton forging the thunderbolts and Susan delivering them. In this depiction, they are working together. Meredith Bergman, the sculptor who created this amazing statue, expressed her great hope for it. She said, "Whenever people see the statue, I hope that they will remember that somewhere in the world at that moment, there are women leaning over a table, working, visioning, strategizing together for a better world." And that's what we're up to in this session together on the last day of this amazing, amazing gathering. We are a global community, and the work in which we do together is a global movement. The first nation to approve suffrage for women was New Zealand in 1893. And amazingly, in New Zealand, the vote was extended to the majority population as well as the indigenous population, the Maori people. Then Australia approved votes for women. Then moving to Europe, country after country approved suffrage at the beginning of the 20th century. In the United States, suffrage was approved in August of 1920. In the Philippines, suffrage was approved in 1935. The amazing leader, Pura Villanueva Caló, helped organize thousands of women. And when suffrage for all people was put to a vote, 9 out of 10 votes supported it in the Philippines in 1937. These measures to approve suffrage for women, however, did not accomplish everything that was needful. There has continued to be effort to suppress votes in all of our countries, in all of our states, in all of our communities. And so the call is clear to us to continue the work, to press on toward freedom, and to work together, joined hand in hand, heart to heart in this good work. I first became very interested in the women's suffrage movement in my own country, the United States of America, when I saw a video series called Not For Ourselves Alone. It's a documentary of the lives of Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. Their friendship was very unique and very powerful. They could not have been more different. They both were born into a degree of privilege, were well educated. They were very different in the life that they chose as adults. Susan B. Anthony chose singlehood. She decided to devote every single effort of her life to women's equality and women's suffrage. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, on the other hand, married and had a number of children. Susan B. Anthony would say to Elizabeth Cady Stanton, "You've got to stop having babies. We need you out here. We need you out here traveling and speaking." But Stanton loved her part of the friendship, and she read and wrote and crafted the speeches that Susan B. Anthony delivered across the United States. One of the remarkable convenings in the history of the United States was the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848. I traveled with a small group of clergywomen friends to this space because I wanted with them to breathe the air and to learn more about the Seneca Falls Convention. The Women's History Museum there is remarkable, and on the exterior wall are displayed for all to see the 19 articles that were presented to the Seneca Falls Convention. 60 women and 40 like-minded men heard what at the time were very radical ideas: that women should have the right to own property, that women should have the right to speak in court, that women should be considered in the event of divorce for the custody of children, that women should have a degree of financial access in legal documents, and that women should vote. My friends and I sat out in front of this declaration of sentiments and went through every one of them, pausing to have conversation about it, and the ways that this moment impacts our lives now. The privileges, the opportunities that we have that are directly related to the vision of these women and like-minded men who gathered at the Seneca Falls Convention. They gathered together, committed to the freeing of slaves, the abolition of slavery in the United States, and the full participation of women in the democracy of the United States. Following the Seneca Falls Convention and the end of the Civil War, slavery was ended, and the sad reality struck. The sad reality was that it seemed impossible for the United States to accept two revolutionary ideas at once: the freeing of thousands of slaves and the offering of access to women to polling places. And so the movement came to a critical juncture and a great divide. And in that moment, Frederick Douglass, the great emancipator of slaves and the great advocate of universal suffrage, said to the women who led the movement, "Your hour, the women's hour, will come." He was right. Yet it took 3 more generations for the woman's hour to come. And only one of the women present at the Seneca Falls Convention lived to see the passage of votes for women in the United States. She was 18 years old in 1848 and very aged in 1920. Susan B. Anthony said, "We need to always remember that we are sowing winter wheat, that the spring will see sprout, and hands other than our own will reap and enjoy." Susan B. Anthony said often, "This cause will come to fruition," realizing that she herself would probably never see it. As we lean in together, my sisters, we remember that we are sowing winter wheat, that we're called to action, that we're called to be confident, and the lives of these who have gone before us call us to action in our own time to create a more just, a more equitable, a more gentle, a more inclusive world. I found myself in conversation with Nancy Keenan, who at the time was serving as Montana's State Superintendent of Public Instruction. She had a lapel button. It was an election year, and the button said, "Remember Jeanette Rankin." I said, "Who is Jeanette Rankin?" "Jeanette Rankin," she said, with her eyes wide. "Let me tell you about Jeanette Rankin. She was the first woman elected to Congress. She was elected from the state of Montana. She was elected just prior to the First World War, and she was one of 60 to vote against the United States entering the war. She was sent home for a bit from Congress as a result, and she ran again in the run-up to the Second World War. She was a devoted pacifist, and she was the only vote against the United States entry into the Second World War. Jeanette Rankin, elected in 1916, was the only woman in Congress, and therefore the only woman able to vote in support of suffrage for women in the United States in 1920. She devoted her entire life from beginning to end to the cause of freedom and justice and equity, universal suffrage, and peace on this earth. As she approached her 90th birthday, she organized a march in Washington, D.C. of over 5,000 people to protest the American war in Vietnam. Jeanette Rankin is one of a very few women in Statuary Hall in the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. Her statue was placed there in 1985 after her death, and there it remains as a call to action to women to be engaged in creating that world that God dreams into our hearts and into our souls. Whenever I remember Jeanette Rankin, it's a call to action. 20,000 women of all races converged on Pretoria to protest the Urban Areas Act in 1956. In South Africa, they gathered to bring 15,000 petitions to resist the apartheid movement and the divisions created in this time. These years later, the Methodist Church of Southern Africa have elected a woman bishop. Bishop Purity Malinga now leads the Methodist Church in Southern Africa, and on her cabinet are several district bishops who also our clergy women. We give thanks for Bishop Malinga. In her first address to the Methodist Church of Southern Africa as their presiding bishop, she used the opportunity not only for celebration of the advancement of women in the leadership of the church, but as a call to action in her country. Though we would like to celebrate with fulsome hearts, she said, we lament and grieve the reality of rising violence against women in our country. Now, in the country of South Africa, 51% of married women report domestic abuse at the hands of their husbands. Reverend Malinga was issuing a call to action for the men and women of South Africa to rise up, and to work for a gentling of their society and solutions to these difficult dynamics, which they speak aloud, along with the President of South Africa, who has called upon the country, even in recent months, relative to this alarming rise in domestic violence. Around the World Council of Churches have invited Thursdays in Black, for us to don on Thursdays black clothing as a sign of solidarity with women around the world who are victims of sexual gender violence. The call to action in this session is not only to voting rights, but to engaging in all the ways that we might make this world the world for which we pray, that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. My first Episcopal assignment was to the Mississippi Annual Conference, and I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity there to engage in the creation and the experience of journeys toward the light. These were actual journeys to different places in the state of Mississippi where there had been violence, racist injury, great harm, great hurt, where we hoped to have conversation, to acknowledge the history, to be reconciled, and to move forward. The first of the journeys toward the light was in Louisville, Mississippi, the hometown of Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer walked out of a cotton field to register to vote in Winona, Mississippi. As a result, she was arrested, she was beaten. When she returned home, word spread of her courage and of her witness. In Jackson, leaders of the civil rights movement reached out to her to join the ongoing effort. A young man at the time spoke with us, now with gray hair like my own. He told us of driving out to the Mississippi Delta to find Mrs. Hamer. He found her very humble home. The front door was wide open. He carefully and softly went up the steps onto her porch, knocked on the door frame, and said, "Mrs. Hamer, I've come to pick you up." He said she simply got up, turned, walked without a word, following him to the car, and rode with him back to Jackson. This ride back to Jackson began an amazing ongoing witness. Fannie Lou Hamer was a powerful speaker, a strong witness, a tireless advocate for voting rights for all people, the founder of the Democratic Freedom Party in Mississippi. She said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." She said, "It's better to have 3 than to have nobody." She said, "If I fall in this, I'll fall 5 feet 4 inches toward freedom." The life of Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer is a call to action. The women's hour will come. The words of Frederick Douglass, the great emancipator and universal suffragist, became the mantra of those who pressed for passage of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Over and over again, those working for suffrage for women repeated his words, The woman's hour has come. The woman's hour has come. The woman's hour has come. Elaine Weiss used this mantra in her title, The Woman's Hour. Her story, the amazing telling of the 6 weeks leading up to the ratification by the state of Tennessee, taking women's suffrage over the top. In the United States, any amendment to the Constitution has to be ratified by a number of states, and Tennessee was the great last hope. From all directions, people came to Nashville, Tennessee to press their point of view. Women and men who opposed suffrage, and women and men who favored suffrage. From the presidents, through the governors, through senators and congresspeople, to local conversations in living rooms and bars and churches and community centers, the dynamic was tense. What would happen? Would it pass? On the day in which the vote was taken, a young legislator had in his pocket a note from his mother. Phoebe Byrne had written to her son, 22 years of age, the youngest legislator present, and she asked him to change his vote, to vote for votes for women. When the roll call was made and Harry Byrne's name was called, he arose, and his yes, surprised the gathering. Pandemonium broke loose, and with the ratification by Tennessee, the women's suffrage amendment was passed. The pandemonium was so great that it said that Harry Byrne had to escape through a window. Such is the dynamic, such is the engagement of so many faithful people in making progress. In the United States of America, over 900 campaigns were waged at local, state, and national levels in order to finally pass votes for women in August 1920. I commend to you the virtual play, Finish the Fight. The title says it all. The passing of the 19th Amendment, creating suffrage for women, did not guarantee that women would have access to voting rights. In fact, women of color did not have access. The play, Finish the Fight, creates for us voices from communities of color, a Chinese American woman, a Native American woman, an African American woman, and a Mexican American woman tell their stories of pressing, always pressing forward for votes for women in their communities. The last segment of the play depicts Mary McLeod Bethune. Mary McLeod Bethune was a strong, brave advocate for women and girls and all people. She was an educator, an organizer, a suffragist, and a freedom fighter. She created a school for girls in Daytona, Florida, and her work for voting rights and for the improvement of her community provoked the wrath of the Ku Klux Klan. One night before an election, 200 Klansmen appeared on campus in their white robes, carrying lit torches. Imagine what a frightening sight that was to the girls who were in the dormitories of the school. Mary McLeod Bethune said to them, "Be quiet and turn out all the lights." The lights went out in all the buildings, and she said, "Turn on the floodlights." And they were switched on so that harsh, bright light shone upon the 200 gathered Klansmen with their torches. In the silence of the night, the light continued. Mary McLeod Bethune stood in the doorway of the main administration building, facing down the threat. And in the brightness of that light, they turned and left, cowards, she said, as they were. The next day, Mary McLeod Bethune led 100 African Americans to the polls, where they waited all day long to cast their ballots. But before the polls voted, those ballots were cast. And the person that they supported, who they believed would be most helpful in their community and raise issues of justice and equity and access, was elected. And there was great joy. Mary McLeod Bethune is a call to action to us. Her life, her witness, her memory is with us still. I pray that this time we have shared together will be used by God to create our imagination so that we might serve and dream and build a new world. May our imagination be expansive. One last invitation. Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. Note the title, Reverse, not slow down, not stop, but reverse. 100 strategies to reverse global warming. Each is ranked from 1 to 100 in its level of impact, with number 1 being the most impactful. Strategies 6 and 7 both relate to women and girls, 51% of the global population. Number 6 is education of girls. Girls' education, it turns out, has a dramatic bearing on global warming. And number 7, family planning. For women to have children by choice rather than chance and to plan their family size and spacing is a matter of autonomy and dignity. We are called to teach, to share, to converse, to create. May God continue to lead and guide us as we lead and guide God's people. And may we be continually called forth as we lean across tables, as we work together, as we dream together, as we strategize together toward the new world that God is creating. Thanks be to God.